Hey, well, Bruce, it's really nice to see you again. Look, you've been with the firm more than 30 years. You're one of our senior international tax partners here in KPMG in the United States. You were just telling me you've been working on retrofitting client structures and sort of processes around how we achieve that with clients. Tell me a bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rodney. Good talking to you. So it's really something that's come about because of all the tax reform that we've had, both in the States and abroad. So, over the last 3-4 years, it didn't start with the U.S., but it's kind of got the U.S. tax reform in the middle, and then, continues on with BEPS 2.0 and ATAD 2. There's been a significant amount of change around the globe. The U.S. tax system is the opposite of what it was. We have a worldwide min tax system. At the same time, there's a lot of attacks coming from other jurisdictions in the context of hybrid entities and hybrid instruments and, nexus taxation, and how everybody gets their fair share of tax, and whether we have the proper substance under DEMPI or these new SEGO rules, or the changes that are coming about through the multilateral instruments, and even holding companies without a lot of substance may be at risk for getting the treaty benefit rate because of principal purpose test that's in each of these ratifications so far within the MLI. So there's a whole lot of change going on, and apart from U.S. tax reform, and given the volume of change. Given where we are right now in this COVID world, given the point that we are already limited as to resources, companies are sitting there with legacy structures that they've created over the last 30 to 40 years under our old tax system, which were great ideas and also could have come about through the acquisition of companies. And these structures, at best, have no meaning anymore, or at worst are harmful to the tax profile or create exposures. So, examples are like, foreign tax credit splitters in the high-low tax baskets. Well, that doesn't work anymore because we have the GILTI inclusion. We're going to blend our foreign tax credits to come up with our current tax, and we're going to use it or lose it. So the splitters kind of have no meaning, and should they stay around or be repurposed for something else? Should we retrofit that structure? A very, very popular thing was basis aggregators, Falkov type structures, or other ways of having a upper tier holding company that had a lot of tax basis, but no E&P. So we could get through cash repatriation strategies and have a return of capital and not a taxable dividend with a credit against it, which may not be one. So what does that do? Well, there we have a company with high basis foreign assets, and to the extent they have interest expense, that's going to be, or stewardship, that's going to be allocated to the GILTI basket, which is already a grind as far as getting full credit. And you've got a use it or lose it type system with the GILTI credit. So basis aggregators are actually harmful right now. And where we've seen, typically they can be domesticated, or you can liquidate the company, or somehow retrofit to get rid of that basis, because we've had a full 965 inclusion and we've got annual GILTI inclusion. So another place to retrofit. Another example is, to avoid BEAT, all our principal companies in the U.S. took their subsidiaries overseas that were getting cost plus 5 or 10% for marketing or support or R&D services, check them open. Well, that was great for BEAT purposes. We kind of viewed that as the nuclear option. Let's think about other ways to get there. And now we have ATAD 2, which is attacking those structures and saying you're getting a double deduct. You're getting a deduction for local jurisdictional purposes in the EU, and you're getting a deduction in the US. So let's flush on ATAD 2. We're going to disallow the expense deduction in country, and you could have DCL issues in the US. So there are all these things out there that companies have legacy structures with, and issues. And they're now trying to spend the time to look at their global footprint, look at their supply chain, look at their mechanics of their structure, and see what either should just be taken away or be replaced with something that has more robustness, that works, and that drives a similar rate. So we really are spending time going through kind of a triage of a company, a whiteboarding session, sitting with the client, talking about these issues, looking at the key ones that affect them, and then giving choices as to how to mitigate or retrofit. And with Dempy and SIGA, that typically also requires people movement. So there's just a lot of activity in that area. And I think companies need help from a resource perspective and at different levels, thinking it through. If they need arms and legs, we can provide that. But many clients are still getting their arms around the issues and how relevant they are. Another one, we just had a discussion with a kind of a mini whiteboarding session, and notice they've got CVs in their structure. They're not IP holding companies, but they do get some residual earnings. The CVs will become domesticated entities subject to normal Dutch tax rates starting January 2022. So companies need to change CV structures, even if they weren't for IP purposes, even if they're transparent, they still have issues because there's going to be another shoe that's going to drop. So it's really keeping everyone informed, staying current, staying flexible in your replacement structures. There are financing structures that work. We know territorial systems work now. There are other structures that work, but we have to be able to replace those with the next thing until the dust kind of settles here. So that's what we're doing. We got a great toolkit that we use internally that hyperlinks from issues to solutions and resources. But you can imagine it's quite an undertaking to kind of appreciate all the structures out there over the last 40 years, how they are impacted for U.S. and foreign tax reform, and then what the replacement strategies are, what we should be thinking about. But it's a fun place to spend your time in.
Well, I'm sure that ends up being a little like Whacka Mole, right? You identify one structure that was really good and doesn't work, and then that leads you to another one and another one and another one.
You got to look at it in an integrated way, because the way our system works, it all kind of is one balloon, and you got to make sure that you're addressing all aspects of that. And then when you get into it, it's going to be indirect tax issues that need to be addressed as well, to the extent you change elements of the supply chain and contracts, as far as reviewing the service contracts and the things that are antiquated, because everything needs to be updated to reflect the reality of what companies are doing as well. So there's a lot of detail that goes into it at the end of the day. But it's a bit of whack-a-mole, but really you got to, as I tell people, you got to look at the forest while you're cutting down the tree. So that you have the picture in mind while you're working on the particular mitigation or retrofit that you've got in front of you.
Well, that's just fascinating, Bruce. I can only imagine, given everything that everyone's gone through in COVID, what with reduced resources, but also just the way so many businesses now are reassessing the way they do business globally. This has to be like a great time to take a look at this stuff.
Yeah, the nicety too is, we don't need to fly folks around from different jurisdictions to have a meeting. We can have them all in our little Brady Bunch squares and have immediacy of access to some of the jurisdictions or the vulnerable points or national tax. So in some ways, it allows us to be even quicker at kind of the thought leadership.
Well, that's just fascinating, Bruce. And it's a great reminder that, we all should be revisiting our organizational structure and objectives just on a regular basis, just given the pace of change. So, hey, Bruce, it's really good to catch up with you again. Thank you for your time.